everything else is an object, right? So string is an object, our scanner is an object, our array of integers is an object. So to create an object of a certain class, you need to use the new operator. So this is how we saw with the scanner, and kind of explain why we do this. A little bit right after I talk about classes, I'll explain how you can kind of initialize things and stuff like that. And we'll talk about, I'll kind of go back and explain what an object is. Actually, I'll explain classes right now. So a class is essentially a template for an object. Okay, and then I'll go back and explain what an object is. So it defines what an object will look like and what functions the object will have. Every object is an object of some classes. So let's go back. Let's define what a class is. So I'm actually going to go in here and we're going to do, something pretty easy. So when we right click on the source, you can create new things. So you can create like a package, you can create like a class, a file, a scratch file, For now, we'll just create a class. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a counter. So when I'm creating this class, imagine there's kind of like a blueprint to something, right? So there's a blueprint to your house, or there's a blueprint to your car, or there's a blueprint to a plane, right? It has some attributes. For example, in a car per se, right? It has how many tires does it have? How many doors does it have? Does it have like an open or closed roof? What type of engine does it have? What type of exhaust does it have, right? What color is the car? What make is the car? What's the VIN number of the car? All these different attributes it has. And that's kind of like the blueprint of the car. You kind of have to fill that in to actually be able to create, to create and manufacture the car. And, kind of take that idea of a blueprint. And what we're going to implement is our first class. We're going to do it, I guess I'll do it for you, but I'll kind of tell my steps along the way. We're going to create a counter. And the object of this counter is to just be able to increment the counter. And that's pretty much it. It's going to be very simple, straightforward. So how you create a class, just like how we did, I created, I right-clicked, new Java class, right? And then you give it a name, so I gave it counter. So this is going to be the name of our class. And later it's going to be how we kind of use our class somewhere else. But for now, think of this class as a blueprint. So when you kind of like think about a counter, what should it really have? Well, it should have like a value that you increment. That's pretty much what a counter has, right? Just a value. I don't really see anything else, right? So, okay. So what we can actually give it is we can give it variables. So what we can do is we can write int, int counter or int value. By doing this right now, basically this value is going to be able to be used anywhere within this class. So having said that, if I was to kind of go in here and write int, x, I'll be able to use this x anywhere within this class, within these functions, and within the for loops and everything like that. So it's like kind of like a scope of a variable that you can use anywhere, outside of these functions, in the functions and stuff like that. Right. So what else should we be able to do? Well, we need to give it like an initial value. So there's different ways to do this. And for now, we're just going to do it like this. So just how we initialize like a variable, we can initialize the variable in here. And then what we can also do is, well, we need a way to increment it. So we can actually do that pretty easily. So this is pretty much our class, right? So we have a class called counter. We have this kind of blueprint, right? This is our kind of blueprint that we're going to use to create an object. And I'll explain what an object is shortly. And within this blueprint, we have this counter or this value with a value of 0. So let's go in here and let's create a method here. So public static void our counter. We'll just call it counter for now. And let's call it. And it's going to be our counter. Okay, so the first thing we really want to do is we want to create an object of this class. So from kind of my example where we have all these different attributes before we can actually create a physical copy of a car or a physical copy of a house, or not a physical, like a physical entity of a car, a physical entity of a house, a physical entity of a plane, a physical entity of a computer, of a microphone, of a headset, anything like that. There needs to be like a blueprint. And this is the blueprint, right? It kind of tells us that this counter is what the name of like the blueprint is. And then we know there's some sort of like certain attributes associated with this blueprint. So now when we go here, we actually want to create, kind of like the physical instance or the instance of our car. So we have all these attributes for our car, right? We have the color, let's do this. So for our car, we have our color, we have our make, we have our VIN number. I don't know, we have our how many tires we have. I don't know, for now, that's pretty much all it is. So when you make a car, you kind of like keep this in mind as you're making it so that it's all going to be, right. And kind of like, this will be kind of like our blueprint of the car, right? And when you make it, you kind of give it this value. So this would be like red, a BMW, whatever the VIN number is, and a car usually has 4 tires, right? And you kind of do this as you're making the car. So, right, so you don't really go in and be like, I have a red BMW, but you don't really see the car at all, right? And this is because it's just a blueprint, right? You can go in with like a picture, whatever, right? So, but what you're missing is actually like the physical object, right, of the car. You don't actually have it, you just have the blueprint. So how do you like actually make it, right? Well, for cars, they're manufactured, whatever. Tesla, BMW, whatever, they're manufactured, they're done physically. But in here, the way we actually kind of like create an object of our blueprint is first we have to define and give it a type. So just like how we create like an int, like a variable, right? Or like a primitive variable. So my int, kind of the same thing happens for an object or for a class, right? So in this case, the type of our object is going to be our counter. So counter is our type. Then we're going to give it a name. And, that's that. But there's a problem, right? When I try to kind of use this, it's going to tell me it's not initialized. So what does this mean it's not initialized? So we kind of go here. And, well, actually, go back. So when it's not initialized, when it's kind of the same thing as we don't give this variable a value, this integer a value. So without it, you can't really increment, you can't really do anything because there's no value. All right, the same thing for my counter. We know what the type is, just like how we know what a type is for an integer, but we don't know what the actual value of this is. And the way we kind of do it is we use this syntax here. So we use counter, new counter. So what does this tell us? First, we are creating an object here that is of type counter, and we're setting the value to be a counter, right? To be of this class that we're going to use right here. And this is basically our object. And now we can use this and do like things on it. So if this was a car, imagine once you get your car, you're able to drive it, wash it, change the tires, repaint it, maybe change the engine and stuff like that. So now we have this physical entity of our counter, and we're able to use this to do anything we want. So let's go back to the slide just to explain, just to read this out. So again, everything in Java is an object. So to create an object of a certain class, you need to use the new operator. So in this case, our class, our counter, our variable was my counter. Our new tells us that we were creating like a new class or like a new entity of this object or of this class. And then this class is going to be, my counter. And the arguments, don't worry about that for now. Where class is the name of the class. Where class is the name of the class of the variable as well as the name of, this is very weirdly set. So where class is the name of a class, variable is the name of a variable, and the variable is a variable that stores a reference to the created object. So, reference, so anything that's not a primitive type is a reference to like an object. So if I was to go in right now and I was to print it, let me just run it. It's gonna give me a reference. Right, it's giving me this reference, for example, the same thing that it does when I create like an int, and I go out. It gives me a reference. And later when I want to access these points, I can go like int 0, or we're gonna see what we're gonna do for the class or for this object. Okay, the created objects are called objects of the class or instances of the class. So, they're actual object, or like we usually say, they're an instance. So an instance is the same thing as like kind of saying like, let's say you have multiple kind of like cars, right? And they're all the same. Well, it's going to be, if you own like that car, right, it's going to be your instance of the car. It's like, this is my physical copy or like my physical car, and it's nobody else's. And whatever you did to your car, even though we have the same car, whatever you changed after you got it, it's not going to be like applied to my car. We don't have this. We don't really at that point have the same car because you changed something in it. So an instance is something that's like private. It's yours. Nobody else can change it except yourself, unless it's stolen. But let's not talk about that, right? Nobody wants to talk about stolen cars. But that's the idea of an instance. It's your instance. It's your car, and nobody else can change it except you. Right? No matter what everybody else does to their car, your car stays the same. Right. So that being said, how can we access, this kind of value or this variable or whatever this is, this kind of attribute to our counter? Well, what we can do is we can actually do my counter, and then to access the objects, just how we kind of accessed math.upper, we did a period, and then we did like divide, or I think we did floor, right? Right, with this period, we're basically able to kind of access attributes or methods of this instance. Now, I don't know, I guess I'll explain why we can do it like this, but for now, worry about this counter, right? So having this period, we're now able to kind of access all of these different things of our object in our class. So, anything but this value that there is actually embedded into every object in Java. So this equals, string, hash, notify, get class, notify, all of this stuff, it's embedded into every class in Java. Anything outside, well, you're gonna see like value is outside of like the scope of all this stuff. It's something that, we actually created. And now we're kind of able to go out and print, my counter dot value. Now we're able to go in and we're able to increment, right? Or we're able to print it. What we can also do is when actually, that value, you can actually increment it, right? So if I copy this, oh, like this, okay. Right, we're able to increment it and then we're able to print it. Okay. But let's say we want to put some condition on this